Hello, thank you for joining us for our first Clean Cities Coalition meeting. It's really exciting to have you here. And Sam, is that little box popping up at the bottom?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. So just a quick look at our agenda. We're just going to do some brief introductions. We'll cover the background of the Clean Cities Coalition. We'll discuss how that fits into Clark County's objectives with our all-in sustainability initiatives. We'll cover the benefits of clean cities and some upcoming events. So this is just a small part of our Department of Environment and Sustainability team. This is who's going to be running the Clean Cities Coalition through Clark County. We have Marcy and Jody, the director and assistant director, and I'm sure you've seen them at our meetings and events. Rena is the planning manager of air quality and climate, and she's the newest member to our team, so make sure you say hi to her and make her feel welcome. Sam, the sustainability program administrator, will be talking briefly about our all-in initiatives in a little while here. And I'm Nicole, I'm the Clean Cities Fellow. This is the project I've been working on for my fellowship. And then just please introduce yourself in the chat and get to know everyone. And then Jody was going to say some things to kick this off. Let me stop sharing my screen.
I'm going to say some things. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I just thought it would be helpful for some of you. I think a lot of you are very familiar with what our department does, but we were the Department of Air Quality, and recently in 2019 became the Department of Air Quality and Environmental Management. We lost somebody. But for the purposes of just from an air quality perspective, I just wanted to give the perspective that our department acts as the air pollution control agency for Clark County. And in that capacity, we ensure compliance with the Federal Clean Air Act. So we do permitting actions of stationary and major sources. We have compliance and enforcement, air quality planning and air quality monitoring. As many of you know, those that live here probably understand that, we do have some air quality challenges. Our air quality has been improving for the last couple of decades, but we do have challenges with particulate matter, a lot of dust, a lot of wildfire smoke. And then we also have an ozone issue. So precursors to ozone being pollutants from combustion engines and such do contribute to our ozone issue. We are in a maintenance situation for particulate matter, but we are in a non-attainment issue for ozone. So actions like this Clean Cities designation and working on getting combustion engines converted to something less polluting are really important to our air quality. And you'll hear more from staff about the importance of these efforts for sustainability and resilience. But I did just want to point out, the critical importance to help keep our air clean. And we thank you all for joining us today, and I will turn it back over to Nicole.
Great, thank you, Jody. Just let me get my slides back up. So I just want to provide a little bit of background about Clean Cities. A lot of you are already familiar with the work that they do, but in case anyone is still unsure about what the Clean Cities Coalition is, it's a network to reduce petroleum fuel use. This is their overall goal, through the Department of Energy. So they do this through approved alternative fuels and idling reduction. And the purpose, of course, is to reduce dependence on foreign oil, provide cleaner air, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. It was created in 1993, so it's been around for a really long time. It's a really well-established organization, and it's run by the U.S. Department of Energy. You can't just say you want to be in the coalition. There's steps that are required to receive a designation, and that's what we're currently working on here. And there's over 75 coalitions in the country. However, when you look at this map, you can see that there is, a large hole right here where Nevada is. So it'd be really nice to get a coalition in our region and be able to work with the nearby coalitions on projects that will help the Western states with clean cities and cleaner air. So you might be asking, why would we want to join Clean Cities? So first off, there are funding opportunities through the Department of Energy that are only available to coalitions. It also provides national recognition. As I said earlier, it's been around since 1993, and it's a really prominent organization, so it'd be nice to be a part of that. It'll provide a collaborative space for our community, so anyone that's interested in alternative fuel use, this will be a place for us to gather and learn more about that and have capacity building. It'll provide cleaner air and fewer greenhouse gas emissions. And also the Department of Energy provides support and education and technical trainings for coalitions. These are just some of the achievements that Clean Cities has had over the years. They've reduced nearly 12 billion gasoline gallon equivalents through their actions. They've put more than 1 million alternative fuel vehicles on the roads. They've reduced driving by 26 million hours, and they have partnerships with more than 20,000 stakeholders. So getting Clark County involved with this, we would just help add to these numbers and, reduce petroleum fuel use in the country. So who is a stakeholder for Clark County? For our coalition, we are interested in working with anyone who wants to reduce petroleum fuels in Southern Nevada. So that could be a fleet manager that has a fleet of 500 vehicles, or it could be, just an individual that wants to learn more about what alternative fuels are out there. We want to work with everybody. But since this is mostly transportation based, we are really interested in working with fleet managers, car dealerships, municipalities, and even nonprofits that are focused on cleaner air. These are the 6 fuels that are approved by the Department of Energy as alternative fuels to petroleum. So in particular, Clark County is focused a lot on electricity as part of our operations, our county operations for All In, and we're looking at it for the community as well. However, we understand that this may not apply for all of our stakeholders. We also understand that we're not going to switch to EVs overnight, and we need some other options available to us. So these 6 are approved by Department of Energy and are, count for our Clean Cities Coalition. And if you want to find any more information about these fuels, you could do it through this Department of Energy website or through our website that we have up and learn a little bit more there. I just also want to cover what types of equipment we are considering for this. It's not just light duty vehicles or heavy duty vehicles that use a lot of diesel. We want to cover every type of equipment that uses gasoline or diesel fuel. So light, medium, and heavy duty, off-road vehicles, construction equipment. We're also looking at lawn equipment like leaf blowers as well. So any of these will count towards our coalition's goals. For our organizational structure, this will be run through Clark County government, and they will provide funding for the coordinator and host most of the meetings and events. The coordinator is the individual for every coalition that oversees what's going on for that particular region's coalition. So for Clark County, it'll be a Clark County employee. They will coordinate the meetings and events and ensure that progress is being made as we convert to alternative fuel vehicles. We will also need an advisory committee and working groups, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. And our coalition will also just be made up of general stakeholders as well. These are the overall goals for every coalition, and I'm sure you're already aware, it's increasing the alternative fuel vehicles in the region and the infrastructure for those vehicles, but it's also to recruit new stakeholders and make sure that membership is sustainable. It's to promote incentives that are available to stakeholders, and it's also communicating the message to the public so that everyone in Clark County knows what Clean Cities is about and what alternative fuels are out there. The designation process to join the Clean Cities Coalition is 2 steps. The first one is an apprenticeship, and that begins with just having some meetings and events, which we're already doing right now. We would form an advisory committee, and then we would submit an application to the Department of Energy, which would include letters of commitment from the advisory committee. Once we earn that apprenticeship, Then we can pursue a full designation. So you do that by showing a demonstrated commitment by continuing your meetings and programming, developing a strong stakeholder base that actively participates, forming working groups, and then submitting a 4-year plan to the Department of Energy. So does anyone have any questions right now about the background of Clean Cities?
So Nicole, the 4-year plan, is that every 4 years you submit a plan with updated information?
Yes, so there's a renewal process every 4 years, and it's not as intensive as the original application, but you just have to update how you've progressed and what new goals you have.
Okay, great.
And if people have questions, you can enter them into the chat, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question now.
And I don't mean to jump the gun. Are you going to mention the previous designation that we've held?
So no, thank you for catching that. We did have a previous designation that was run through the city of Las Vegas. And I believe it dissolved around the time of the recession, but it was very active for about 15 or so years there. So you might already be familiar with it because you may have participated in Clean Cities in the past. But this will be run through Clark County now.
So I know the Southern Nevada Fleet Association was heavily involved in the first designation as well, and some of the members are on. So we definitely look to you for some expertise and guidance on this process. So we're happy you're here.
Nicole, this is Deb Reardon with the RTC. I had a quick question. This 4-year plan, will this be kind of separate from All In, or will All In kind of serve as that 4-ish year plan?
So the plan will be separate. It will be written by the coordinator, but it will overlap with the goals of All In. So this will be focused on transportation primarily, but it's a plan that you send into the Department of Energy, and they have like an outline to follow for it. But it involves mostly just letting them know what alternative fuels are available in the region, like where the fueling stations are, an approximate number of vehicles that are alternative fuel already, and then like our 4-year plan, which we can use based off of the All In plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions. Well, there will be more time for questions in a bit, but we're going to go and do a couple more polls. These are informal polls, so don't stress out if you don't feel like you know how to answer it. It's just kind of to help us gauge a couple of different things. So this first one is, what industry do you work in? Are you a vehicle or equipment provider, energy or fuel provider, nonprofit, governmental agency? And then if you're other and you don't fit into one of those boxes, feel free to throw it in the chat where your organization falls.
So it's nice to see a good mix of members here.
Lots of governmental and municipality, but that might be skewed a little bit because our entire team is on the call today. Awesome. Thanks, Norma, for that in the chat. We provide solutions for fuel reduction through telematics. Awesome. Let's go to and do one more poll real quick. Here we go. What interested you in Clean Cities today? Was it our incessant bugging of you to come? Was it that you're really interested in health benefits, potential for funding?
I don't see incessant bugging as a choice, Sam.
But this one's a ranking one, so you can drag each of the little boxes. This is a hard one for me.
Well, it's really great that a lot of people are thinking about climate change.
Yeah, I think that new connections piece, while it doesn't rank highly, I think that's going to be a really important part and benefit to the Clean Cities Coalition. All right, we'll give you guys just about 30 more seconds. Awesome. So addressing climate change and community health benefits seem to be the biggest reason that people are here. So
Okay, so up next is Sam, and she's our Sustainability Program Administrator, and she's going to talk more about the All-In initiatives and how Clean Cities fits into that.
thanks, Nicole. Okay, so as she mentioned, we're going to talk about All-In Clark County and our different sustainability and climate action initiatives. A lot of you I know have been involved in our All-In process, so apologies if some of this is a little bit redundant, but for those of you who we haven't worked with yet, I thought this was a really important piece. It is, oh, there we go. Okay, so just a brief history, and Jody touched on this before, but in 2019, we were tasked with preparing a sustainability and climate action plan. That meant restructuring of what used to be the Department of Air Quality and changing that name to the Department of Environment and Sustainability. That also meant that our department absorbed the Office of Sustainability. So under our department, we have air quality, the Desert Conservation Program, and the Office of Sustainability. And then it also came with my position, the Sustainability Program Administrator. At the same time, we joined the County Climate Coalition. We set a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And then, of course, I mentioned that the task with putting together a sustainability and climate action plan. So the direction from the Board of County Commissioners was put together a plan as fast as you can. So it didn't make sense for us to put together something regionally right away. It made more sense for us to start in-house to learn from it, learn by that planning process, and also to set the example for the rest of the community. So we started with a sustainability audit of our internal operations. That means looking at what we were doing well already, where we could improve. So looking at things like our transportation and our energy usage and how prepared we are for the future. So out of that sustainability audit came our county operations plan, and that was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners in February of 2021. We are currently in the process of implementing the actions that are in that plan. And part of putting that together was also creating an implementation strategy so that we knew how much each action was going to cost, which department was going to take the lead, and what steps needed to be taken in order to, ultimately go to the end of that action and be like, check, we've completed it. So that's, like I mentioned, in the implementation process right now. Then we put together a regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about that later. But once we completed that, that was in the beginning of this year, we were also at the same time putting together a climate vulnerability assessment. And what that is, it's a report that looks at our different climate hazards in the region. So extreme heat, drought, wildfire, and flash flooding, and looking at how those different hazards affect our systems and assets, and then also creating some resiliency recommendations to be prepared for the future. So both the regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory and the climate vulnerability assessment, those are two reports that are feeding into our community-wide sustainability and climate action plan. We expect that to be out early next year for public comment. So how are we addressing climate change from our county operations plan to our community-wide plan and all the initiatives that are kind of wrapped up in that? The first is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, that's going to help us with the mitigation of climate change. And then second is preparing for the impacts of climate change, preparing for the future, making sure that we can be adaptable and that we can be resilient to climate change. So right now I'm going to talk a little bit about our sustainability and climate action plan for county operations. We broke it up into 5 key areas. You can see it ranges from energy to resiliency to waste, transportation, and water. Of course, today, I'm just going to focus on that sustainable transportation piece. So we set these 3 main goals to reduce our emissions from county operations, to support county employee commuting alternatives, and then of course promote policies, programs, and infrastructure investments that prioritize multimodal, clean, efficient transportation options throughout Clark County. So what does that mean? Those are great goals, but how do you break it down into different actions that we can take to reach those goals? So here are some example of our actions. You can see on the left, it ranges from policies to adopt technology, different programs for commuting, installing our electric charging infrastructure, and then of course, apply to become a Clean Cities, because Clean Cities Coalition support transportation efficiency at all levels. So we're utilizing or hoping to utilize Clean Cities as a way to amplify our efforts. So after this plan was put together, we started looking at what does it take for us to install this electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So our department director had this great idea to put together this transportation electrification working group. So we started this, and we're working with a lot of different stakeholders to find, what barriers are we facing as we're installing charging infrastructure and as we're trying to electrify the region. What opportunities are there? And then working together. So this group meets monthly currently, and part of that is sharing our efforts as we're moving forward with our county operations, doing our site walks and looking at what infrastructure opportunities are available. We can share our experiences to help other people within that working group. Now I'm going to talk about this all-in community plan that I mentioned. And I'm going to start with our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So we used data from 2019, and the reason we used 2019 was because it was the last normal year. And what I mean by that is, that was the year before COVID. So if we had conducted a regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory in 2020, it might look different, but this was kind of business as usual. So you can see here that a huge portion of our greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation, both on-road and off-road. So we can use this report to help us create strategies that will make the biggest impact on the community and lower our greenhouse gas emissions the most. So you can see up at the top, for example, agriculture, forestry, and other land use is only 0.3% of our greenhouse gas emissions. In other regions, it might be something like 20 to 30%, but here it doesn't make sense for us to focus on those and reduction strategies there. So out of this greenhouse gas emissions inventory, we put together, backtrack. This is just a bigger breakdown of all of the sources of greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. So we've got gasoline, diesel, electric, CNG, and then of course off-road as well. So we've got 23% of our total emissions for on-road transportation, and then 14.1% of our off-road transportation. So I started to mention this as we finished up that regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We did an analysis to look at what pathways we could take to reduce our greenhouse gases and reach our ultimate goals of 2050. And if we're talking about transportation, you can see that little teal sliver in there for, mostly if we electrify our vehicles across the region, we have a lot of potential for savings. This is just a little bit of a closer look. Opportunities there in aviation, like I mentioned, gasoline and diesel. So as we're transitioning to be more efficient and have zero emissions vehicles on the road, that is the amount of opportunity that we have. We put together our community-wide plan, and we focused on 6 key areas, ranging from diverse and circular economy to sustainable water systems, but you can see smack dab up there in the top middle, the connected and equitable mobility, and that's our transportation piece. So what does our vision look like? So we're still putting together the plan. We don't have it finalized or anything, but we do have an idea of our vision and our potential goals and actions. So for our vision, we want to focus on developing a safe, connected, and accessible transportation system that prioritizes low carbon mobility, public transportation, and active lifestyles. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And then, looking here at our potential actions, advocating for equitable access to fossil-free transportation resources. So, making sure that everybody in the community, all different types of organizations and people have access to those fossil-free transportation resources. So what are our next steps? Big next steps are to continue with the implementation of our actions in the county operations plan. We're working with all the different departments, trying to make those things happen, making sure that there's funding available for the actions that we have in place. And of course, as I mentioned, one of those actions is designating a Clean Cities Coalition. So we're hoping that we can generate some interest and move forward with that. And then next is we are releasing a draft of the all-in community plan for this January. And in that process, we're also developing some implementation strategies, again, just to make sure that we have a plan that doesn't sit on a shelf, that we know how to break down these actions and actually hit the ground running and make some change for our community. So with that, I will leave you with questions, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Hello, this is Phil Comstock. I'm State Director for the Nevada Propane Gas Association. In your model, you're showing 0 emissions for electricity. That is not correct. There are emissions that are created by electricity. I get that there's 0 emissions out of the tailpipe from the car. But what emissions are created when we develop that energy and when we move it across transmission lines?
Sure. So I think that there's, when we put together that model, you separate energy from buildings and then and then emissions from transportation. And we do recognize that as we're electrifying vehicles, it is going to require a little bit more electricity on the grid. So that is accounted for in the model. So you'll see actually, let me go back and share it with you. Energy gets fatter for a little bit. And that's because we're in the process of, am I sharing that already? Yes, no?
Yeah, you were still sharing.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
so you'll see right here So for energy, it actually, this is for buildings. It actually goes up a little bit here because this is where we're transitioning to where we're transitioning to electric vehicles and we're putting a little bit more strain on the grid or using a little bit more electricity, but at the same time, our energy grid is going to be getting cleaner. We're going to be transitioning off of fossil fuels into more renewable energies. So that's a little bit here too with that NV Energy Renewables. So those considerations were taken into place for this that analysis. And if you want to email us afterwards, we can give you a little bit more detail about that, and definitely happy to do that.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we're in the transportation industry. We're in the all-in industry in Nevada, and we do have renewable propane coming on board soon. It's in the works right now, but our model shows that our carbon intensity is less than electricity with renewable propane. So we keep talking about getting rid of fossil fuels. That's a utopian view of energy. We need to have an all-in energy view, and there's a transition period.
Absolutely.
Maybe by 2050 we'll be there, but we're not there. And there are fuels that will get us there, the bridge. So
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Phil, and thanks for bringing that up. I'm not sure if you were here in the beginning when we started talking about the different types of alternative fuels that we're talking about for clean cities. Nicole, do you want to speak to that for a minute?
Yes, so there were 6 types of alternative fuels: biodiesel, electricity, ethanol, hydrogen, natural gas, and propane. They're all approved by the Department of Energy for clean cities.
yes,
And
I'm very aware of that. Yeah.
Clean Cities considers itself fuel neutral, so any of those are acceptable alternatives to petroleum.
Okay, so that's what I was hoping, that it was an all-in solution, and Nevada already recognizes 6 different alternative fuels. So thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions for Sam?
Time for some poll questions, Nicole?
Yeah, so let's launch this one here. Is your organization currently converting to alternative fuel vehicles? And that can include any of those 6 that we just mentioned. And I understand some may not have fleets at their businesses, so this may not apply.
It's not accepting my vote.
Don't take it personally.
These are informal, they're informational, but just for the recording purposes, so as we go back and take notes, if you want to put your response in the chat, if you're okay with everybody seeing that, that's perfectly fine as well.
So a good majority here is converting to alternative fuel vehicles at their organization. So that's great to hear.
Okay, I'll give it about 10 more seconds and then we'll do one more poll question. All right. This is another one that you can rank. I don't know about you guys, but I really like watching the polls change as people submit responses.
So it seems like light, medium, and heavy duty are pretty much tied for the top two positions there.
I was actually expecting to see higher ranking for funding opportunities. Everybody wants money. All right, 10 more seconds for anybody who hasn't responded. All right.
Okay. All right, so let me share my screen here. So next we're going to cover, what we're going to do as a coalition in Clark County and some of the benefits to expect from Clean Cities. Just to give you an update on our outreach to date, we've already participated in a panel for the International Car Rental Show. We've had exhibitor booths at FleetCon and for NV Energy's EV Ride and Drive event. We've sent out some surveys and other digital communications. So we've already built some groundwork for this coalition and to show that we have programming and we're educating the public about the coalition. So this is some of the work we've already done. Speaking of the survey, I sent back out in August. I really appreciate everyone that took the time to respond to that. We'll just cover some of the more interesting topics here. But the first is, have you heard of the Clean Cities Coalition? And 70% said yes, which I think is really great. It shows, the reach that this program has and the name recognition that it has. However, if you weren't aware of what Clean Cities was, that's what we're here for. We're here to educate and show the opportunities that Clean Cities Coalition can provide to Clark County. The second was, what is your level of interest in alternative fuels? And as you can see, the average response was very high. So I think that's really great, really promising that, a lot of people are wanting to make this switch to alternative fuel vehicles. And then finally, how large is your organization's fleet? 50% said over 100, which is great. That means we have a lot of opportunity to make really big change converting these vehicles. However, I don't want to discredit anyone that has a smaller fleet, or if you don't even have a fleet. We want to make sure we're participating with everyone in the community and we're making change where we can. So we'll have general stakeholder meetings just like this one. They will be quarterly, and after this one, we are hoping to have presentations from local stakeholders. So anyone that's, converted a vehicle to alternative fuel and you want to share what your experience was like, any lessons that you've learned, to share best practices with the rest of the community, that will be really great. It's your opportunity to network with others in your industry, and it's also an opportunity to have joint meetings with other transportation related organizations. So like, for an example, Jody had mentioned the Southern Nevada Fleet Association. They have been really great helping us with this coalition process so far. So that's like an opportunity that exists as well. We will be having events and outreach and other programming. These will occur during months that we don't have the meetings, and they might happen more often if we get a really good response from our stakeholders. Some of the topics we'll cover are funding opportunities, technical trainings, new products, and ride and drives. And we'll also send out resources on our website and through newsletters. So I just wanted to talk about funding opportunities briefly, because I'm sure you might have some questions about those. We'll be offering workshops. Next month, we'll have one about local and state funding available. We'll have grant writing workshops, and we'll keep those up to date every few months on our website. there's also additional opportunities through the Department of Energy just for coalitions. So in 2021, for example, there were 20 projects that were awarded $71 million. These are just 3 examples of those projects. And you could see one was a Clean Cities Coalition, but another one was a nonprofit, and another was an automotive supplier that are within these coalition areas. The first project was awarded $5.2 million, and that was to increase EV chargers in underserved communities. The second was $3.9 million to increase EV chargers for workplaces. And the third was $4 million to make DC fast chargers more affordable. So we've talked a bit about general stakeholders, and now I want to start touching on the advisory committee. So again, a general stakeholder is anyone that wants to learn. So we welcome everyone as a stakeholder here. But however, for the advisory committee, we're looking for subject matter experts. So that could be anything like somebody who's been a fleet manager for 10 years, or someone in the fuel industry, or a nonprofit that looks at clean air in our community. We also want organizations that are connected to the community. So, if you have reach in Clark County, or even if you're a small business that's just been here for a while and you understand the market and the needs of Southern Nevada, we'd love to hear from you. So these are just a few examples of what we're looking for. And this is what to expect from the advisory committee. So we're looking for them to provide technical expertise to the coordinator, just, maybe they have a question they need answered, but also to provide information for that 4-year plan that we need for the full designation from the Department of Energy. You also help guide the coalition on what kind of educational programming we should be having, or what our goals should be for our 4-year plan. The expectations, it's a 1-year commitment. You'll attend committee meetings in addition to stakeholder meetings, and the frequency of those will be determined once we get our committee members picked out. You'll champion the coalition's mission through active participation. So that just means coming to the stakeholder meetings, participating in the other programming that we have available, and advertising that through your channels. You'll deliver needed information to the coordinator. In particular, we need letters of commitment for the apprenticeship designation, and we might need some data about, which alternative fuel vehicles you have in your fleet for the full designation. You'll recommend programming and funding opportunities, coordinate and organize the working groups, which will form after our apprenticeship designation. And I just want to note that this is not a formal board, so it's not going to be a really strict and rigid group, but you're there to help guide the coalition and provide your expertise so that we can make this a successful group. And we are looking for a committee of 9 to 15 members. So once we earn the apprenticeship, we have to form a few working groups. The nice thing about that is we get to choose which ones that we want to have for our region, what makes most sense for Clark County, but these are just a few examples of what we can choose. So it could be fuels and infrastructure, education, or recruitment for new stakeholders. So I gave you a little bit of background about what to expect from our coalition, but I'm really happy to have Tammie, who is the Utah coordinator. She's got a really active stakeholder base and a really active coalition, and I just want to introduce you to her and have her speak to what it's like to actually, have a coalition running in your region.
Wonderful. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I have to say it's incredible to listen to Nicole and Sam share, and just listening to the grassroots of what a Clean Cities is doing and is supposed to do. And so it's a great reminder to me to hear those engagement pieces and what stakeholders do. And it's all of the above fuels and what we work with as a Clean Cities program. So I'm happy to be here today. I've worked a lot with a lot of Nevada folks over the years, and especially in the last few years, we actually have a project that involves Nevada, and I've supported Nevada as in lieu of a Clean Cities. So it's been a really exciting time and great to work with the Nevada folks. You guys have a really great state and some really interested and active stakeholders currently in the alternative fuels arena. So it's, again, been a really big pleasure. I've been working with Candy Barr Worley, and she does serve on our Clean Cities program. So when the program piece was shown up for 2021, we were actually funded for 2 of those projects here in Utah, and Utah Clean Cities was the prime in that. And so it's a great example, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through my slides. But I mean, just as was shared, we're here to foster economic, environmental, and energy security with local decisions, and certainly to work with stateside fuels to lessen our dependency on fossil fuels and to use cleaner fuels than what we currently are using as a nation. So this slide essentially just talks about that there are 75 coalitions across the nation. There are closer to about 80 right now. Most of our federal funding is a 2-to-1 match, so 50% federal and then 50% local in-kind or state dollars, industry dollars. So that's a really great combination. We're really proud in our Clean Cities program that with those dollars, typically for every federal dollar received, we match it upwards of $10 for every federal dollar. So that's really unheard of with federal funding. So we're excited about that, and it's certainly a big promotional piece to show the effectiveness of an active coalition. And up to date, there have been $460 million since the beginning of the Clean Cities program. So next slide, please. So this is an example of our stakeholders, and it also shows some of my board members as well. So I work with a board of trustees, so it's an active and working board. I have an executive board and a board of trustees that has 15 different stakeholders and leaders from across my state. And so some of them are on here, but this is essentially my collective of stakeholders. These are active members. And so you can see a wide variety of everything from nonprofit, industry leaders, academics, municipalities, and school districts. So it's exciting as you pull together your coalition to consider, it as a statewide organization. And while it's handled in one county, you will be reaching across, county lines and working across your state with, for example, your school districts. There'll be a state board of education. Your universities work across the state. Your DOT works across the state. Your Office of Energy Development. So not only are you looking at local decisions, but you're also looking at statewide decisions. You're also looking at regional impacts. And then you'll also see the opportunity for your Nevada Clean Cities to work with not only regional partners, but also national partners. And I'm going to show you how that looks as we go to the next slide. So I combined a couple of different projects into a couple of slides, and this project was funded, and I'm a prime on this project with Utah Clean Cities, and this is a EV Zion pilot demonstration. Zion Park has the largest transportation system of any national park in the nation, and we're working on an East Side initiative, which is an additional visitor center on the east side of the park. So the west side, which many of you who have been to Zion Park will know, that's the main entrance, and there's a visitor center and there's a shuttle system. And to kind of partner up with the comment about all fuels on the table and propane being a very clean fuel, I am happy to say that our program was part of a project 22 years ago that put the first shuttle system in the park. And it was propane. It was essentially a propane generator. Back in those days, we really didn't have alternative fuel vehicles happening much, and so they built those shuttles. They're beloved, and they are still running today. So, and they've also reduced the amount of pollution that would have otherwise been in the park by 130% if they had ran, diesel or gas shuttles instead of the propane. So we're very proud of that shuttle system, and we're building out a new electrified system and also looking very hard at hydrogen using micro SMR units nearby and green electrolysis opportunities as well. And so it'll be in the very near future that we'll start running some hydrogen in the park as well. We believe, we hope. So this vehicle that you see here is our electric shuttle that we are demonstrating. It goes 120 miles, and we're looping it through the park and seeing how it performs. And I'm happy to say to date that it is performing beyond our expectations. And again, if you might look at the partners there, we have 75 partners involved with this project. These are some of our main partners. Again, our DOTs, our National Park, our State Energy Office, and our Clean Cities program. So then looking at the next slide, this is a really great project. Again, this shows how Utah Clean Cities is partnering with clean cities across the nation. So you have Alabama, Clean Fuels Ohio, South Shore Clean Cities is in Wisconsin, Columbia Willamette, which is up in Washington State, Oregon State, Virginia, and Wisconsin. So again, this is again how you see not only do clean cities work in their own state, they work across the nation. And this was an initiative that Utah Clean Cities put together with Transportation Energy Partners, and we went out for a grant, and it was called Drive Clean Rural USA, and it's an active grant right now. And what we're doing is we're working with rural gateway communities. Gateway communities meaning they're by a national park or by a recreation area, or a monument. So by doing that, we wanted to make sure that our rural communities, because out west we have a lot of rural communities, and some of those rural communities, again, the gateway communities, are impacted by a tremendous amount of transportation, vehicle miles traveled around their area, and also just infrastructure. So if you think of Zion National Park, again, as an example, there are gateway communities on either end of them, and they work with millions of people throughout the year with the tourism industry. So by saying that, we also wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to have public transportation with alternative fuel vehicles, have access to their cities and their communities, their school buses, to have alternative fuel vehicles. And so in remote rural areas, so for example in Utah, we have propane and natural gas buses. They're fantastic. And again, to say that we are fuel neutral, we are. The natural gas buses that we have running right now that have Cummins engines, they are zero emissions at the tailpipe, and they also run on renewable natural gas. So those are exciting opportunities. And again, all things on the table as we transition away from our fossil fuels. And again, this is a great project, and we're working with all of our national parks. And one of the things we're doing with this project is we're actually putting alternative fuel vehicles, natural gas, propane, and electric, and possibly a hydrogen car if we can get the hydrogen. We're allowing the cities, the municipalities, and national parks to actually demonstrate and pilot these vehicles. So they'll have these vehicles in their cities, in their towns, in their fleets for upwards of 4 weeks, and then we'll move them around the state. So I hope this kind of inspires you to think about possible projects for Nevada as well. So again, you can see who we're working with. We're working with our utility and our inland port. So again,
I'm not seeing the next slide. Sorry to interrupt. I'm not
partners.
seeing the next slide.
Next slide, please. This West Electric Highway and the Charge West is the project that we had Nevada is involved with, and a great opportunity to work with 8 states, 8 governors. Our 8 governors over 5 years ago signed the first MOU to say we want to work across our state lines to build out regional transportation connects and regional corridors that are electrified. And with that, this collective of our 8 Western states, we have the largest EV corridor collect in the nation, and we're proud of that. And the work that we've done, we've worked with our utilities, we've worked with a needs assessment across our states to see what y'all wanted, what our states wanted, what our needs were with our utilities, and some possible opportunities and challenges. And so we put out those reports. We also are working on a report that is focused on remote and off-grid charging. So there's some really great opportunities there. Nevada actually has an off-grid charger, which is called a free wire charger, and it was part of this project, and it provided part of the in-kind match that we needed for this project, and it was funded by your Volkswagen settlement dollars, if I recall correctly, and it's in Rye Patch, which is a state park, I believe. And again, it's off-grid, and so it's a fun opportunity to see how we can use with technologies in the West that are not necessarily part of a grid system, and they meet our off-grid and remote areas for charging needs. And then jumping to the Drive Electric Utah, it's actually part of a Drive Electric USA project. And again, we're working with statewide branded programs, so under the umbrella of Drive Electric Utah, or and you can see that we need Nevada there, right? When you see the corridor go across the state, you can see that there's a definite connect where Nevada needs to be. And so that's where the West Electric Highway System and the Charge West, that will be a brand that we'll continue to promote. We're here to support consumer education, work with dealerships, work with our utilities, and work with our government officials to ensure that we have policy and incentives in our states that encourage EV adoption. So with that, I think that this is my last slide.
Yes.
Great. So that's my last slide, and I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to look at some of the chats that may have come through and to talk further about our program. I do want to emphasize, as you pull together your advisory committee or your board, consider, working with your academics, working with industry partners, working with, of course, your state agencies, but also ensuring that you work with your clean air advocacy groups. My next board president, she's my vice chair right now. She's the head of the Utah Clean Air Partnership. And so we do a lot of work around idle-free programs. Utah, we would love to share our idle-free program with you all. It's a great way to start. It's a great way to inform and get people aware of emissions around schools, particularly. We do a big program where we make sure that all of our school districts have access to idle-free reminder signs and different projects like that. So again, we're happy to support. We're here to provide any kind of assistance that you may need and certainly cheer you along as you get your coalition up and going. So thank you, Nicole, for asking me to speak today.
Thank you so much for presenting. I think we'll hold off for questions for just 1 minute because I just have to wrap up here, and then we'll take questions for Tammie and any other questions you have about clean cities. Just really quickly, upcoming, we have a small and medium business funding workshop. It's proposed for mid-November. Once we get the date secure, I'll send out an email, so keep your eyes open for that. But you can learn what opportunities exist in Nevada to convert to alternative fuels. It'll be a webinar presented by Kirsten Stasio. She's the executive director of the Nevada Clean Energy Fund. This is actually a new state organization. She'll speak a little bit about what they do as well, and they'll be a really great resource for us in the future. And there might be some other guest speakers as well as we line this up. And then we're going to send out a survey next week. I really encourage you to fill it out. It will be very helpful to us to determine the level of interest being a stakeholder. We'll also have a question on there if you're interested in being on the advisory committee. So make sure you fill out the survey. Let us know that you're interested in the committee, and I'll reach out to you based on the contact information you provide. It'll be due by November 3rd. And if you ever have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me. This is my email address. And then just to kind of recap everything, the overall goal for Clean Cities is to reduce petroleum fuel use through alternative fuels and through idling reduction. We currently have no representation in Nevada, so this is a really great opportunity for us to fill that gap. It requires a designation process, which we've already begun the steps on. It'll be run by Clark County, and they will employ the coordinator for it. We need at least 9 members to be on the advisory committee, and we'll need them to submit letters of commitment to the Department of Energy so we can gain our apprenticeship. And then once we earn a full designation, we'll have access to funding that's only available to coalitions and the opportunity to collaborate with other coalitions such as Tammie's. You can see, all the great work she's doing in Utah, and we can help out with that. So please remember to complete the survey by November 3rd. And now we'll take some questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen so we can see everyone.
Hi, this is Phil Comstock again. Can you share the PowerPoint presentation with us?
Yeah, I think we're going to post it on our website. So I'll let you know when that's available.
Yeah, I'm serving on many boards and committees, and I would like to present this to my board. So.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be great, Nicole. Make sure when you send out the survey that you also include the link to our website. We will be sharing a QR code, but unfortunately at the moment our website is very long. So until we get a more direct URL, we'll send out a link.
Does anyone have a question for Tammie?
I do. And apologies if I missed this, Tammie. When did Utah form their Clean City?
Oh, I should have said that. We're actually celebrating our 30-year anniversary.
Wow.
Yeah, 30 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I wasn't there the whole time. I've been with Clean Cities for 7 years. So
Okay.
there's been 2 other directors before me, and they were amazing and dynamic. And what they began with and where we are now is just incredible to look at. So, yeah, thanks for that question.
And my next question is, what do you think has been your biggest challenge with the whole process? Do you think it's been continuing stakeholder engagement? Do you think it's been the actual conversion piece, the money piece? What do you feel like has been the biggest challenge?
I think for me, I mean, coming in, I mean, with alternative fuels, when I arrived, we were working with natural gas and propane exclusively. And while they are really clean fuels and amazing, and they still continue to be very relevant fuels, I think what's been exciting at this point is to see a larger transition that we needed to see, which also includes hydrogen. So many people think that hydrogen is just coming into the Clean Cities portfolio. It actually rose up in the 80s under the Bush administration, and people were really excited about it. They invested a ton into research and development, and then it was just expensive, and there was already just a huge investment in gas and oil on behalf of the United States, as we all know, and so it just didn't really get much traction. So I think what's exciting now is to see just a really amazing portfolio of all the fuels that are available in the West, and and lesser so when we look at like biofuels, to some degree, like biodiesel, and also ethanol. That's not really super popular out west, but it's not our fuel. So our fuels are renewable natural gases and methane, biofuels, hydrogen, electric. We have such an opportunity there. And I think with our very sunny states and our opportunities to use renewables, we're going to really rock it. And I see, when we look at Nevada, here's one of the coolest things that I think is happening with our stakeholder group and our 2 our side-by-side states, is that 90% of the freight that comes off of the West Coast will come through our western corridors, right, moving east. And so much of that comes through Nevada, and so much of that comes through Utah. Over 40% of all heavy-duty transportation ends up in Salt Lake City. And so that's why we call ourselves Crossroads of the West. So building out our corridors and making sure that our medium and heavy-duty fleet vehicles have access to alternative fuels is essential to transitioning. So that's an exciting piece. And when we look at the existing stations that are along our corridors, which include propane, natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and now more increasingly electric, and then hang on to your hats, because it'll be hydrogen, not in 10 years, not in it's coming now. And I mean, it's pretty exciting. And we're building out a regional hydrogen hub. And so when you look at that, now's the time to really just be looking and being prepared for the transportation, revolution, really, which is happening now. So I probably kind of floated around that question, but I would say just it's an exciting time to be on the first page of all of these new technologies. There's zero emissions with the new Cummins engines with the renewable natural gas, and that's even a kind of a beyond piece. So where you say that some of your greatest challenges are ozone, those are co-pollutants, right? So not only do you have emissions, but you also have the co-pollutants that combine with emissions and make the ozone, which is, we're suffering from that in Utah as well. So now's the time to address it. So we're doing it, and it's exciting. This is the good news, right? Y'all are going to be doing the good news and really making an impact on the future of not only of your state, but of the world. So it's an exciting time to be an innovator. So thank you.
Thanks, Tammie.
We you have any other questions? Oh, it looks like Marco has his hand up.
Yeah, sorry for joining late here. I don't know if you had covered this at all, but by any chance, did you reach out to the previous Regional Clean Cities Coalition members and talk about any of this effort to restart it? And because I know the city was involved, or former fleet manager was the head of it, and the city had a hydrogen station for a while, and just was wondering if you had any follow up on that by any chance.
Yes, so we've been in touch with the Southern Nevada Fleet Association, who took over after the city of Las Vegas, and we've been working with them, and they've been really helpful bringing in some of their members to join this coalition. But yeah, we're working with them to see, what steps we should be taking and to learn from them and see what their experience was like when they had the coalition previously.
Thank you.
Rena, I think, has her hand up.
Thank you, Sam. I have a question to Tammie. Tammie, I'm really excited to hear about the progress with hydrogen vehicle, but can you give us an idea of costs involved, both in terms of capital cost to buy this type of vehicle and maintenance cost compared to electric cars?
So if I'm hearing you correctly, did you specifically speak about hydrogen?
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing that hydrogen is a new, fuel on the market and new technology, those are going to be hard to answer. We can give you kind of we can kind of talk about that right now. They're deployed, hydrogen vehicles and medium and heavy duty vehicles are deployed in California. All of the hydrogen that we're going to make in Utah currently will go to California to run their hydrogen fleets, right? They're running hydrogen buses, they're running some hydrogen heavy duty vehicles, etc. So as far as to answer that question, that's all early innovator stuff. I mean, I could give you information on natural gas and propane and liquefied natural gas. Hydrogen right now, what we're trying to work on with the fuel itself. So you have to have the fuel, right? It's the chicken or the egg. While there are manufacturers building out hydrogen vehicles, it's not as robust and as large scale as it's early adoption stuff. So with that said, what the biggest goal before we'll ever see any hydrogen adoption is that it's on parity with gas and diesel, and so that diesel gallon equivalency to a hydrogen gallon equivalency is almost there. It's really close, which is surprising. So we're excited to see that massive and fast tracking movement. Right now, also think about hydrogen as an energy sector, a power plant, fuel cells generating a power plant. And so when we look at electrified vehicles, there's that, right? Our grid systems are already stretched to deliver electricity. And we know that there's some intricacies to building out electrification. If you were to hook up a hydrogen semi, and we were just talking about that today in a grant writing opportunity that we're working on with hydrogen, to plug in one semi would just, in the average, it's just a tremendous pull from the grid system. So we have to be able to modulate that and be prepared for that as utilities to bring on, number one, electrified pools from the grid system. But that's where hydrogen is going to come in and really save the day, because hydrogen uses 90% less of a battery than a full battery. So when you look at even a delivery van or a delivery truck, a medium duty, they're going to have some massive amounts of battery on them if they're just fully electric, whereas a hydrogen is going to have a lot less. So again, when we talk about hydrogen, there's a lot of things that it's going to be able to do. And first of all, it's going to mature, but secondly, it will be used as a power plant alternative to fossil fuels, right? And then secondly, it will be used as a transportation fuel in conjunction with fuel cells. So I didn't really say, total cost of ownership and what that will cost, but I think it gives you an idea that it is maturing to have parity with other, but like any new technology, it just takes a while to get industry going, to get our infrastructure going. And so that's what we're all working on, and that's what your Clean Cities will work on too.
Hi, Tammie, it's Phil again. My concern with hydrogen is there are no refueling sites in Nevada. We have 3 refueling sites in California. Until the infrastructure's there, it's not viable. But
Yeah, actually, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and that's what's being built out. I mean, right now we're preparing for, Utah has the largest storage facility, it's salt caverns in the Delta area, in the world right now. And so they're going to be filling them up with hydrogen, and it will go through the pipeline to California to begin with. So when you talk about hydrogen, and if you look at the Alternative Fuels Data Center, California has about 35 of them. So, and I'll put this link in for y'all if you guys want to see what I'm talking about. So there are systems and there are micro stations being built. I just was in a meeting today where we're building out 50 of them in Utah. So it's happening. It's happening.
Okay.
And you know, so it's an exciting opportunity, and that's for sure. And it isn't fully developed, but it's coming on full on, and it really may be one of the greatest solutions that we have. I'm fuel neutral. I just talked about how important the propane piece
I
was
know,
in Zion National Park.
I heard you. I appreciate your input. But the cost paradigm, is it because gasoline and diesel is getting so expensive to be comparative in price?
Well, so when we look at alternative fuels, and you will all work with this when you start working with your Clean Cities program, and I'm going to throw this in the, I'm going to throw it into the chat as well. So I'm going to throw in the federal and state incentives opportunities that are in your state, and that way you can kind of start looking at this. So when you have alternative fuels, every year my program, I'm also a vice chair of this federal program. We work with our delegates in DC to ensure that we have federal incentives, and those are tax incentives, really big incentives for building out alternative fuel stations. And again, this is to get parity with gas and diesel. And so what I just put in the chat is the laws and incentives for Nevada. And so you can see what's happening with your utility, state incentives for heavy duty vehicles. But also, if you want to click on your federal, there are federal incentives. So let me give you an example of a fleet in Utah that's a refuse company. They invested in natural gas. They're running on their renewable natural gas at the pump. They invested in that with their refuse haulers. And with that, they're paying 25 cents a gas gallon equivalent for natural gas today. And they have some diesel in their fleet, and they're paying $4 a gallon, right?
Okay,
So
I can appreciate that. My concern is the government incentives are going to go away someday. When are we going to get back to a capitalistic system where we allow the marketplace to work?
well, I think, Phil, I'm going to firstly say that our government has heavily subsidized gas and diesel all along. So, and your propane has been promoted by these incentives as well. And I get the capitalist market, and I agree with you. That is something that needs to be, balanced out. But I will say with alternative fuels and in defense of them, they have never received the amount of government support that gas and diesel currently has today.
Okay, well, I don't understand that because I'm not getting any incentives. I'm running 10 different stores and I don't get any incentives from the government. Well, I'm getting the tax fuel credit for propane. Yes, I will agree with you there.
Yep. I mean, you're getting some. I mean, and the alternative fuels corridor. I mean, again, I mean, I think there are certain applications that are fantastic for propane. Propane is actually one of my favorite fuels as a fuel neutral person. I've really loved propane. So it's a great fuel, and it won't go away. And especially with you having renewable sources for it.
Yes,
I mean,
and that's what's coming next. We're diligently working on. I'm in California as well, and we're diligently working on renewable propane, which will give us a carbon intensity of less than 0.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. It's exciting. Yeah. I mean, so hang in there, propane. I mean, it's awesome, and it has so many important uses, especially in our more remote areas, our national parks. It's an important fuel. So thank you, Phil.
Okay, very good. All right. Thank
Tammie,
you.
there was, oh, sorry, Phil. There's a question in the chat. It says the price you quoted, does that include road taxes?
For the gas gallon, are you talking about the refuse company, Norma? I'm assuming you are. On CNG.
I'm talking about the CNG price you were just talking about.
This is the
Great price it was. My question is, does propane, does everything else include road taxes that you're talking about, so that we're having an honest discussion of the full burden cost of the fuel and road maintenance for the general public?
Well, Norma, I think Utah struggles with that, and each state is different how you're going to collect your road taxes, right? And let's also be very clear: most federal funding pays for our roads. I mean, that's where we get our road money, right? So, but for our state, so for example, Utah actually has a tax on EV vehicles to collect that what would otherwise have been a gas tax. And so the example I gave you is a private fleet, and they have contracts with Dominion Energy, who's our gas provider here, and so they have a contracted rate, and then they get a federal incentive for using natural gas, and so that combined gives them a contracted rate of about 25 cents a gas gallon equivalent. Do they pay road taxes? You bet they do. Do they pay taxes to the state? You bet they do. So I know that they pay a lot of money into taxes because Matt Stallsberg, who's the president of it, is a good friend, and I know what he pays into taxes, and he's complained, right? So, but I understand what you're saying.
So-
Does
so
that
let me
include road
add-
taxes? It's going to go state to state, and it's going to be some of your federal issues as well.
So let me add to that one question and one statement. The question would be, is, since you said the state of Utah has a process for collecting road tax on non-fueled type things that don't typically have road taxes on them, can you share that documentation to the group so that we can look into that afterwards?
Sure.
Because that, to me, I think this is the first time I've heard a state making up that difference. Secondly, when we're talking about the federal monies coming to the state to handle road infrastructure, federal monies, the government fleets are exempt of federal gas and diesel tax. So therefore, the big incentive, they're getting great, it's great. But when you talk to the general public needs to be paying that federal tax. Now, your program you're talking about, I believe, is probably collecting state tax, but are you collecting the federal tax for electricity and propane and CNG and things like that from the general public, so that it's apples to apples, the cost of fuel, in terms of we've fully put the taxes in and fully not put the taxes in? I have people bragging in California that their EV does not pay any road taxes. Ha, ha, ha. Well, I'm sorry, I have a problem with that. And some states, sooner or later, has got to step up to the plate and fix that thing, and have an honest conversation. And if you watch my LinkedIn, you'll see I'm constantly saying, let's have an honest conversation about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for those of you who don't know who I am, I opened the very first public biodiesel station in the nation. I've built all kinds of alternative fuel stations. I've managed the only alternative CNG that was in Reno. I was in the fuel industry for 24 years. And so I have a background. I do understand alternative fuels. And as you said, as one of you said, I'm fuel neutral. I don't care what foo-foo juice it is. If it will clean the air and reduce our pollution, I'm all in for giving it a go. So, but at the same time, I want to have an honest conversation about taxes, and I want to have an honest conversation about everybody paying their fair share. Okay, just keep in mind, government, you don't pay the federal, state, you don't pay the federal gas and diesel tax. The general public should be. So your price will always be different than Joe Q public.
Well, I think I might have a little bit to say about that. the goal of the Clean Cities Coalition isn't necessarily to change how the tax situation is happening. Rather, it's to find opportunities to transition to these, cleaner alternative fuels. So I appreciate understanding your perspective there, and I think it's helpful to see the big picture. I just don't know that Clean Cities is necessarily the avenue where we would have that type of pull or authority or anything like that.
Sam, where I think it comes in as a benefit is that these incentives are, again, to help build up a new and emerging fuel. And we work with 12 different fuels in the Clean Cities program, not just the ones that are shown. There's emerging fuels as well. So helping build up parity with gas and diesel. And just to be clear, 90% of transportation, heavy duty and medium transportation in the United States, 90% is still on diesel. So we're not on parity. So these tax incentives, these encouragements for infrastructure, for stations, for using an alternative fuel, they're in place to encourage fleets to bring on the additional cost of setting up a new type of technology, whether you're setting up CNG, propane, hydrogen, electric, whatever. It's to incentivize and try to encourage the adoption of these alternative fuels. And just like any other fuel, and we've all agreed, once they have parity, then you back off of the incentives. But also to be clear, our government does highly subsidize gas and oil today.
Yes, and biodiesel has been in the market for over 20 years and it's still being subsidized. And Sam, to your point, I really appreciate what you're saying is that this may not be the format to solve that problem, but it is the format to have the conversation of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yep.
And we need to be truthful. I would like to ask, and you'll find that I'm a debater. Doesn't mean that I own what I'm talking about. I'm not going to argue with you as a person, but I want to discuss the item on the table. And an old bugaboo of mine, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but in the past, CNG vehicles did not have to have a smog check in the state of Nevada. Anybody correct me on that one?
That is correct. No, they do not.
So CNG vehicles don't have to have a smog check in the state of Nevada. You want to know the dirty secret why? Because they'll fail.
Because they'll fail, yes.
So let's have an honest conversation. I love alternative fuels. I am the biodiesel queen that started the first public station in the US. I've got no questions on that. Beat San Francisco by a day.
So Norm, I'm going to jump in and then I have to jump off, but I do want to say something just really quickly, and it's not to debate, but you may be right about early CNGs. It's like saying, a Model A with a Tesla today. You can't make those comparisons. So I'd be curious to know what vehicle you're talking about, because I know I work with fleets that are 0.008 emissions with the new Cummins CNG engine. And then it's beyond that if you're using renewables. So they're fantastic fuels. And to your point, biodiesel is fantastic. Biodiesel was originally peanut oil, as you know. So that was, diesel was, peanut oil. So we have this great history, but what I will say is, it does vary. And this is the great part of bringing together stakeholders to a Clean Cities program, because this is important what you're saying, Norma, and it's all very relative and it's very important to say. So keep up your good work. It's exciting to hear what you're doing. And I will say, at least today, the modern CNG vehicles, they're very, very clean. Very, very clean. And they will pass it with flying colors.
Tammie, that's true on your test. My point is that they're not required by the state of Nevada for a smog check.
Well, they are in Utah, so I don't know about Nevada. So you guys can switch that up, and then you can have those great data. Because one of the things your Clean Cities will be doing is having an annual emission reduction, an annual report, and so they'll be able to show what they are able to do with their alternative fuel vehicles, and so those vehicles will be, put to the test. So you'll see some really great stuff coming forward. And any emerging technology is going to have its growing pains and this, that, and the other. But today, alternative fuels are rocking it, and they're very clean at the tailpipe. So Thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I'm going
Thank
to
you,
sign off.
Tammie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So I want to, obviously, we want to have continued conversations about all this and learn from all of you. But right now we have a goal, and the goal is to see who is interested. So Nicole, just give them the last reminder so we can sign off and be ready to see if we're going to move forward with a coalition.
Yep, let me just put up my presentation one more time. So again, the final points here. We'll have the survey out to you by next week. Please try to submit that by November 3rd. There is a QR code for our website right here and my email address. Always feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer your questions or put you in contact with the right person to talk to. But I really appreciate you being out, coming out tonight, today for our first coalition meeting, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts about it. So thank you.